G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of sick of mulling over the 2024 trade period and thinking about what are we going to give up for Liam Baker, what are we going to get for Tom Barrass. At the moment, it seems to be all at a standstill, and frankly, I'm just currently worked myself up into this really negative mindset where I'm really worried about what's going to happen rather than be excited. So I thought I would just park that for one day. At the moment, we don't really know anymore, and I kind of want to save my potential meltdown for after the fact. As part of this process of trying to make myself feel better and worry less a little bit about this trade period, I thought it would be kind of helpful to have a look at the landscape in general over the next couple of years, to look at, particularly West Australian talents out of contract at other clubs at the end of 25, 26, and 27, just to see what's on the horizon there for the Eagles, because this whole list build thing that we're going through right now, I've said in previous videos, there's a few different ways to skin a cat, and you could go through the North Melbourne or what is happening at Richmond currently path of just attacking in the draft. I personally would like a pretty well-rounded way of building our list, and I suppose you could say that's what we're doing in real time right now. We've just signed Jack Graham. We could sign Dev Robertson. We're going to trade for Liam Baker. At the risk of repeating myself, the Liam Baker one just makes me uncomfortable because he's 1 year off being a free agent, so we have to give up potentially a first-round draft pick for him. But generally speaking, I do like the philosophy of not simply hitting the draft, and personally, what I think is happening at Richmond right now will be a disaster for them. I certainly don't buy into this idea that they're going to leapfrog us in their rebuild simply because every player is requesting a trade right now. Anyway, it's not about them, it's about us right now. So with that in mind, I had a look at, what targets we could have over the next couple of years with specific focus on Western Australians. It doesn't have to be West Australian. Jack Graham's not Western Australian, but, we have to limit the criteria somewhat and focus on West Australian talents, which is generally where we're going to get a lot of our trade-ins anyway. So I've looked at West Australian players out of contract who hit the talent threshold of being, a part of a potential premiership team one day. I have thrown in a few more speculative ones. And furthermore, I've focused on players that probably actually feel a need for us. So we're talking good midfielders. There's not too many positions on the field West Coast are pretty set for, but I didn't really include too many key forwards. There's one in there I snuck in there, but we can discuss all these different targets and to what extent they're gettable, I suppose. We don't really know, but to some extent these are gettable, and it makes me feel a little bit better about this trade period if in 12 months we can land a couple of other guns. There's two players in particular in 2025 that I hope West Coast is going all out for, and once I get into who those players are, it will make a little bit more sense, because I realize there's going to be this reluctance to trade out of drafts, and I'm certainly not suggesting we trade all our draft picks for established players, but there needs to be a balance, and some of these I think would be very, very handy pickups for the West Coast Eagles. All right, so I'm going to slap down every name on the screen now for you of players that I think could be targets for us. Now, certainly not saying we get all of them. Some of them would be contingencies for missing out on others, but generally we'll hit the West Australian criteria, the talent threshold, and some degree of positional need. And a couple of I've thrown in there that may not quite fit the positional need thing, but we can still discuss it because this is going to be a moving target. We know what our list is like now, but when we get to 2027, who knows what our list needs are. However, let's just get into it. 2025, I think, could shape to be a very big potential off-season for us. Okay, so that's headlined by Chad Warner. Now, there was obviously the story that broke that Chad Warner is pretty keen to get home to Western Australia. Obviously, there was that rumour, which has been not just from Will Schofield, that actually came from John Ralph as well, that he would potentially have come home to Western Australia had Sydney won the grand final. So whatever way you slice it, I think West Coast is going to go all out for Chad Warner. I'm not saying that I'm confident we'll get him, but I think we're a decent chance, to be completely honest. A few things have to go right. We can't have a miserable season, I think. I think we'd need to show some improvement. I think Harley would need to provide a few highlights, but I think we're a decent chance of getting Chad Warner. And obviously, I don't know what we're doing with pick 3 this year. Do we split it? I'm going to guess that we probably will split it at this current point in time. But could we be in a position to trade out of the 25 draft? Well, I think with Chad Warner in particular, he's going to be 24 and a similar age, maybe 2 to 3 years older than guys like Harley Reid, Elijah Hewitt, guys that will be in the midfield with him, but still experienced and good enough to lead that midfield. Who knows, maybe Harley will be better in 12 months' time. I have no idea. But my point being, he's young enough where trading first-round draft picks, even if it's, one and a bit, we, again, don't know what our pick's going to be. If we hold pick 1 next year, maybe 1 on its own is good enough for Chad Warner. But if we improve and get pick 7, it'll probably cost us a little bit more. Anyway, the point I'm saying is I really do think we need to make Chad Warner a really central part of our plans next year. We've also got in this new era of academy picks and father-sons, we've actually got a few to pick from next year. So in terms of the first round of next year, I mean, it's a little bit early to know how strong that's going to be, but I don't think it's a bad one to trade out of because we've got Charlie Banfield, a father-son, son of Drew. And he may not be a first-round talent, but, you know, if we get him and there's another guy called... There's a kid called Wes Wally, which is hilarious. Wes is in short for Wesley. Anyway, I think that's a hilarious name. I hope he's wearing spectacles. So I've made the point on Warner pretty clear, but I think, you know, Harley Reid, Chad Warner, Elijah Hewitt, oh, that gets me going, to be honest. The other one that I really hope we strongly go for is Stovich. He will be a free agent at the Brisbane Lions. Now, again, I have no idea what likelihood there is. I did read an article suggesting he has some interest in coming home. I'd imagine we have a greater need for him than Fremantle, and I've also heard that West Coast are keen on Stovich. That one's through the grapevine a little bit more, and to be honest, I don't think it's just that bold a call. Like, he's a free agent and a very good defender. Do we have a clear need for Stovich? Maybe not in the same way that we have a clear need for Chad Warner, but, you know, I think he would come in and improve our backline in general. And as a free agent, there's the chance that, you know, if we can offer more than Brisbane and they can't match a bid and we sign him as a free agent, we get him for free. So I'm thinking Stovich and Chad Warner should be our two main goals next off-season. So I've listed a few other Western Australians here. So I've written that FA for free agent for Stovich, to clarify. Everyone else there has to be traded for. So Bobby Hill, I mean, on talent, yeah, absolutely. Probably not my primary focus, purely because, you know, as a small forward, who is outstanding, by the way, don't get me wrong. I just don't know if the cost benefit for a rebuilding team, particularly if we miss out on Chad Warner. So if we miss out on Chad Warner, the team still is probably going to need to hit the draft to build that talent. If we get Chad Warner, we probably can't trade for Bobby Hill, which is what it would require. So I just thought I'd put that there because he is West Australian. Jesse Motlop, I think he's a really good talent at Carlton, out of contract next year. Not a huge positional need for us, but like I said, if we miss out on some of these other targets and then we land Motlop somehow in a trade, I think from a talent point of view, I think he's going to be a really good player, whilst acknowledging the positional need isn't really strong for him. Judd McVee's is a bit of a gun at Melbourne as well. I think he's from Geraldton. I'm certain he's West Australian, but very good, small and medium-sized lockdown defender, a little bit like Brady Hoff. Now, we've got a Brady Hoff, but I think you can fit at least one more similar style player there in Judd McVee, who I think is a very, very good player, but again, would cost something in a trade. Then I've got Sheldrick and Tunstall. Now, these guys are a little bit more speculative. And I wouldn't be getting either, probably, if we got Chad Warner. Tunstall is... I don't even know if he's going to be delisted in 12 months' time. I really don't know where it sits, but I think he's got a bit about him from the Brisbane Lions, and I think he is from the southwest, like Bustleton kind of way, if I'm not mistaken. Sheldrick was taken out of Claremont, and I think it's just going to be... He's going to find it super challenging to get into Sydney's midfield. Now, if Warner leaves, he might stay at Sydney because there's more opportunity for game time. Conversely, if Warner stays there, maybe he'd leave. So just listing an AFL level talent that I think they have there in Sheldrick as a Western Australian who could be targeted in 12 months. But to summarise that, the two that I'm hoping we go for are Warner and Stovich. Take a few academy picks at the end, and yeah, then we move on from there. And just as an aside, do you think if we got Warner and Stovich, you'd feel a little bit better about this trade period where 3 might become, I don't know, 10 and 18 from Richmond? I don't know what's going to happen there. We've traded for Liam Baker. We've got Jack Graham. The mix of Warner, Baker, Stovich, and Graham, and 2 first-round draft picks, I think, like, if you consider that as a whole strategy, I'm starting to like that more. Kind of lives and dies by getting Chad Warner, though, doesn't it? Because that's what we really want to add. We want to add top-end midfield talent, and Warner might be the key there. So I'll move down to 2026. And there's a few here. And again, it's just so hard to really speculate on who's likely to come home. There's been a bit of rumour about Daniel Curtin wanting to get back to Western Australia, which I'm very skeptical of this being true. But nonetheless, we did have some pretty significant interest in him. Obviously, at the time of the draft, there was a suggestion that we would have taken him if we had traded with North Melbourne. So that, plus we probably need a tall defender. Again, the other elephant in the room is Daniel Curtin's probably played a bit of midfield now. Like, I'm not really too sure where that sits. But, I mean, either way, like, if he's a good midfielder, which is still unclear, he could be a player of interest. Jed Busling will also come out of contract at the end of 2026. And unless we unearth, like, a gun key back between now and then, I can see us really needing someone like a Buslinger on our list, which might be cheaper than Curtin. Who knows? But I would certainly ask the question again. Darcy Jones on talent could be there. Again, it probably depends on what our team is looking like then, because he's kind of like a classy, damaging outside mid forward, who at the moment I wouldn't say is a priority. Actually, that's not true. I would take Darcy Jones in a heartbeat. Having said that, it kind of depends like what the rest of our team is looking like, what are our strengths and weaknesses. But on talent, I would hope that we ask the question of Darcy Jones. Lawson Humphreys, taken at pick 60 or 62 by the Cats, used to be our NGA player that we decided not to sign. I'm not too sure what the details were behind that, but we didn't sign him up. Geelong drafted him, and he's become a pretty good player. I think, a lot of these talents come in and look really good at Geelong. So it's unclear exactly what his talent level is, but I think he's a good AFL player. And look, he's West Australian. I don't think Geelong tend to lose players too much. Jordan Clark is one example. I'm just saying he could be an option for us to target. You've got Ed Allen there. Again, I think he cracked a few games late for Collingwood this year. Collingwood, again, probably pretty good at retaining their players, but it could be a case of if he's not getting a game, we ask the question. I don't know how high-level talent Ed Allen is personally. Like, I'm not even 100% sure he's going to be better than someone like a Clay Hall. It's unclear. But he had a few good games there for Collingwood at the end of last year. So certainly an option for us, depending on what our midfield needs are at the end of that year. I chucked Jed Walter in here pretty ambitiously. It'd be hard to prize him loose. Why have I put him in here? He was a Gold Coast Academy player. I believe he grew up in Perth, barracking for the Eagles, and then moved to Gold Coast a little bit later in life and joined through their academy. Now, West Coast, I think, had a pretty big interest in him at the draft. I think they rated it Harley 1, Jed 2, Daniel Curtin 3. That was what Cal Toomey said. I think he's an absolute gun, but at this current point in time, we don't really need a key forward. In 2 years' time, we'll know more. We don't know what will happen in the next 2 years. So if there is a need, Jed Walter would be certainly one player I'd be looking at. I think this one is very much a long shot, though, to be completely honest. Riley Hardiman, again, a running defender from North Melbourne. I'm actually not sure if he played a game this year, but from Swan Districts originally. I think he was drafted about pick 23 last year. Good speed, good skills. Again, no idea what our need will be at the end of 2026, but a player that comes out of contract nonetheless. And then finally, Ben Miller. Ben Miller is actually not a bad fullback there, or key back for the Richmond Footy Club. He will be an unrestricted free agent at the age of 27 at the end of 26. So if you say that we have interest in Buslinger and Curtin, Ben Miller could be absolutely an option. Bearing in mind, I don't know if McGovern is going to hang on till then. He's contracted for one more. Doesn't seem like he's slowing down, does he? He just won a best and fairest. But if there is a need to replace McGovern, then Ben Miller is one guy I'd probably keep an eye on as a former West Australian. And finally, we move to 2027. Again, this is a little bit too far in the future to really get a good feel for. And I believe that out of this group, only Cozzy Pickett is a free agent, but we'll discuss it anyway. Nick Martin will be out of contract, not a free agent. We'd have to trade for him. Again, this is a little bit hard to, really forecast into our plans. Maybe we should really be thinking about 24 and 25, and then past that, a little less clear. Joe Fonte, I think, is a likely type. He was drafted from the Perth Demons to GWS. He will be out of contract. Cozzy Pickett, again, Cozzy Pickett seems to be, homesick every offseason, then he stays at Melbourne, but he will be formally out of contract at the end of 2027 and a free agent. So I think it's worth putting him in there if he's got ties to Western Australia despite being drafted out of South Australia. But, he could be a bit of a, top-up player that we could need at the end of 27. I don't know where we're going to be as a team by then. But from a talent point of view and a free agency point of view, you have to chuck him in here, in my opinion. Then a couple of other West Australians. Lance Collard used to be part of our NGA. That will be the end of his first contract. Now that I think about it, I thought I read that Collard did extend his contract, but Footy Wire has him as out of contract at the end of 27. I'm not too sure about that. I'm just going to treat this as out of contract at the end of 27 because Footy Wire hasn't updated it. Nonetheless, a player that I hope we monitor at least because I think has a bit of talent as a small forward wingman. And I've also chucked Liam Henry in here, which might be controversial because he's a former Fremantle player. But while the two WA clubs don't deal with each other, there's nothing to suggest Liam Henry couldn't go to St Kilda and then back to Western Australia. I have no idea what his needs would be. But if you follow the Brad Hill example, or many players that went to Fremantle actually getting traded back to Fremantle and then back to Victoria, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that Liam Henry could be open to a move to WA 3 years from now. So just one to keep an eye on there. There are a couple of nice St Kilda talents there from Western Australia. And I've painted a bit of a picture of what's on the horizon. But I think if we really narrow our focus, obviously, to this year, I'm actually using this video as a distraction from what's happening right now. But, Warner and Starcevich, if we got those, this is my absolute best case scenario. suddenly I think we could have the makings of a pretty good team. I think our backline would be pretty strong. Not sure about the key back situation yet, but, you know, medium types like Stovich and Brady Hoff and Ruben Jinby back there. You know, I think our forward line is cooking nicely as an aside, and a midfield potentially of Harley Reid, Chad Warner, and Elijah Hewitt primarily, supported by whatever types we got then. Who knows where Yohan Kelly will be? But you kind of think that Warner would probably replace Kelly or push him to a forward flank. I'm not too sure, but either way, it'd be a vast improvement on, you know, the forecast of this team. Everyone's saying it's going to take a million years to rebuild. Well, I think we can possibly expedite this process if we get a top talent like Chad Warner, who, like I said, will be in the right age bracket. Younger than Kelly by a couple of years, I reckon, when we traded for him, and it will be expensive, but sometimes you got to roll the dice, and the good thing is, I think I've said this previously, with Tim Kelly, the timing was bad because our list position didn't reflect that move. Like, we fell off a cliff, which isn't his fault. With Chad Warner, he's young enough where, you know, I don't think we're going to misread our list position. We're going to be between rebuilding and contending for finals around the time we get Chad Warner, I'd like to think. So there you have it, guys. That is just a bit of an outlook over what could take place over the next couple of years, or at least some targets for us to focus on. We may end up with 0 of these players. We might sign a random free agent out of South Australia, like, who knows. But I've kept it realistic, to be honest. I think Stovich and Warner are somewhat realistic. And further down the line, you know, I hope we have a pop at someone like a Jed Buslinger in particular. So even if it's 3 players, Warner, Stovich, Buslinger, over the next 3 years, it's not bad, as long as we nail our draft picks too. If we don't hit our draft picks, none of this really matters, does it? Anyway, guys, let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.